Hello everyone, welcome to S5 series session 16. And today we are going to continue our admin journey and we are going to learn about one more automation tool in Salesforce, which is Visual Flows. And by far, this is the most powerful automation tool that Salesforce gives us. And using this tool, you can definitely tackle most of the development scenarios as well. So please stay tuned with us throughout the session and learn about the visual flows. We are going to cover few of the we are going to divide the visual flow session in two parts. So we are going to cover it one part today and the remaining part tomorrow. So today Narendra will be your speaker and the content is also prepared by Narendra and the lab exercises will also be taken care by him. So Narendra, all yours.
So thank you Manish for the introduction. Hello guys and welcome everyone for today's session on visual flows, also known as flows. My name is Narender Singh. I work as a Salesforce developer and admin both at Miri Infotech. So before moving forward, let's quickly recap what we have done so far and what we have learned so far. So we discovered what is CRM industry and what is Salesforce role in it, and we discovered what are applications, objects, and fields in Salesforce, what are validation rules, what are record types, page layouts. We also discussed what are the relationships among the objects, what is the data model. Then we also learned about how to implement the security. Then we got deeper and we learned about how to implement some automated business solutions, business processes using workflows process builder. So now that we have some fairly decent idea about setting up automation in Salesforce and having discussed workflows and process builder, the next step in an admin's journey is to discover flows. Now let's take a quick look at today's agenda before we move forward and dive into the details of today's topic. So we'll start with today by introducing what is flows and why we need flows. Then we'll see what are the types of flows in Salesforce and what are the building blocks of a flow. Then later on we'll discover how we can what are the different ways you can launch a flow. Then we'll see how we can utilize the power of a flow and how we can implement some business process that is related to our business use case, which will help the organization SFDCFacts to grow their business and automate their process. Then also we'll also quickly see what are the what is the new lightning flow builder all about, which was recently released in spring 19. It's not available for the developer edition yet, but yes, it will be soon available. Then in the end we'll discover what are the consideration and best practices for a flow. So for today's session we will keep the topics for today's session till building blocks of a flow, so that I want you guys to explore more once I take you through the basic elements of the flow, and you can explore how how each element in the flow works, and you can take your time and we can build upon that tomorrow when we start using the flow for our business use case. So let's move forward, and now let's start by defining what is a flow in Salesforce. So Flow is a very powerful business automation tool that can manipulate data in Salesforce in a variety of ways. Such application can be created right from the org setup with just drag and drop of what also we call point click. So basically flows are basically the enhanced version of workflows, process builders, and what flow does is it takes the skill set of an admin to a much level beyond and helps an admin to see to implement more complex business processes. So let's quickly see how we can create a flow. So as you can see in the screenshot, you can go to the setup, then enter flows in the quick find box, and then click on flows and just click on new flow. We'll see later on how to create a flow in our session as well. So let's move forward and let's see, why do we need flows? There is a lot of buzz. If I believe this, if if there is anything more very frequently talked about other than lightning, I think that it is the flows, which comes next right after lightning. And why so? Because let's see why flows are so important for an admin. So this is what I believe. I see that an admin with flow in his or her arsenal is a god admin. Why I say so? Because flows will give you the power you can never imagine. Because what flows can accomplish is very much similar to what before flows admin used to go to the developer for implementing the processes. So this gives admin the whole control, and without having a dependency on a developer to design the solution for him, so the admin can go himself and check out flows and implement the complex business processes for his requirement. So now let's see what are the very important features. I've listed down a few, but the list is too long to consolidate in this particular slide and in this particular session. So first and foremost, what I believe is flow are the visual interpretation of coding. And if from if you have any basic idea about coding and some basic idea about Apex, you will see what are the when we discover the various elements of flow, you will see the relation between those elements and how we code it into the backend using the Apex. The next step, as I already told you, it allows you to automate damn complex business processes just by clicks and without having to write any code. Now this feature is the third feature, and I think this feature is really stands out from all the other features. And why so? Because this feature allows you to create a series of screens which helps you navigate and which can interact interact with the user on a UI level, and you can manipulate or show or hide data or gather information using those screen elements in the flow. So this is really this is one of the most important feature of a flow. Now also, what's really special about flows is you can delete records using flow. And and as an admin, you don't really have any automation tool or any out of the box functionality without other than the delete button to delete a record, but flows can do that for you. Now moving on to the next feature, the availability of flows is not just restricted within the Salesforce org. What I mean to say is, uh, we have communities in Salesforce. For those who are not aware about community cloud, let me just think of community as a extended extended kind of a website that you present your data and you share your data with the external users, and those external users are the visitors or your clients or your basically what we call as accounts in our Salesforce, and they can visit that particular data and they can see their data on that community that you have created for them. So though for those communities you can create flows, and the flows you can use those flows to interact with those particular external users and gather information as according to your needs. And like I said, the list never ends. So guys, the more you explore, the more you will get to know what are the capabilities of flows. So let's move forward and see what are the types of flows in Salesforce. So basically, there are two standard types of flows. One is an auto launch flow, and the other one is screen flow. I when we'll create a flow, we'll see how we decide what are the how we can set the type of flow, and according to our needs we can change the type of the flow, whether we want an auto launch flow or we want a screen flow. So now let's see what is an auto launch flow and a screen flow. So auto launch flow are basically the processes, basically a process or what we call a complete flow which runs behind and in the background with no UI interaction. So it's similar to what we write as it's similar to what we write in coding, which happens in the backend, and the result is automatically manipulated in the database, and you see those changes, on the record page, detail, and the various other things where you have made the changes. So there are some restrictions when it comes to auto launch flow, since the auto launch flow runs in the background. So whenever you are trying to use a screen element in your flow, in your auto launch flow, you will get an error and you won't be able to save that particular flow, because auto launch flow cannot have screen elements in them. There are certain more elements that you cannot use in an auto launch flow, uh, and I'll leave this up to you, and this is for something for you to explore, because there are certain, like I said, flow in itself is a whole subject, not a topic. So you need to be more consistent while learning the flows. The more you practice, the more you get get a good grip on it. So let's see how we can launch the flows, the auto launch flows. So you can use process builder, you can use Apex, and what's really cooler is you can use the REST API of the Salesforce to launch a auto launch flow. Now, having discussed about launch flow, auto launch flow, let's see what are the screen flows. Now, screen flows are really cool when it comes to interacting with the user on a UI level. So whenever you have something that you want to interact, whenever you want to interact with the user on an UI level, s- screen flows are your option. And probably no, usually what before flows, what we used to do is we used to create custom solutions, what we call as visual force pages, to interact with the UI for the custom information that you want to gather. But now that we have flows, the amount of code and a lot of business use cases are what what I would say you can handle just by using flows and not by using the code. So this is how you use a screen flow, and we'll see in the demo. In today, I'll show you how we can use a screen flow. So another consideration for the screen flow, just like in the auto launch flow, you cannot use wait element. We will see what a wait element later. So you cannot use a wait element in a screen flow. And screen flow can be launched using a quick action, custom button, or a custom link. You can also launch a screen flow directly by a URL. I'll show you how. You can also launch a screen flow using a visual force page, using a lightning components, and there are certain other things, and I'll leave those certain other things for you to explore, because I don't want you to keep your mind just restricted to this presentation. I would like you to explore more and more so that you get to learn more on your own, and this is how you get a good grip on flows and whatever topic you are learning. So let's see what are the building blocks of a flow. Enough of the theory now, and let's see what are the elements and what are the basic elements in a flow, and how we use those elements in our flow. So this is our SFDC facts application. We'll go to the setup, and like I said, just simply search for flows and click new flow. You may see this. Just if you are encountering this, just click on download here, click allow, and it will reload and you will see your flow open. Yes, it takes a bit of time to load. So yes, the first and the most important feature that we talked about, the screen element. So this screen element is basically where you gather information from the user, or you display information to your user who is interacting with the UI. So this is where you put the name of your screen. It's always good to put a description, so that whenever you are going through the flow, or when you are debugging something, it gives you a good idea how to use what that particular component is doing, and what is the whole functionality. So moving forward, there are headers and footers in the flow. These are basically used to show header or footer in a flow, and also then there is navigation actions, which says allow finish, allow previous, allow pause. So these are basically the elements which you, as an who is creating the flow, can govern and allow the user to go back to the previous screen or not. So let's see what are the types of fields and the types of inputs that you can gather from the user. So you have text, you have the standard text box, long text, number, currency, date time, password, checkbox, radio buttons, and drop down list. You also have multi-select checkboxes, you have multi-select pick list, and then what you have for output, that basically when you want to display some information, this is the element, that display text element that you use to display that particular information. And also what's really cool about this is you can use your own custom developed lightning components in the flow, and you just need to set it up. If you have any lightning component created, these are the standard ones that come along with the flow, and you can just use them, set the attributes here, you can set the label, and if there are any attributes, you will see those list of attributes. And if you want to go through the attributes, how those attributes work, just go to the documentation provided by the Salesforce for these particular components, and you will know what a particular attribute is doing. So this is how you use a lightning component. And I want to quickly brief you and take you to the radio button section. Now radio buttons uh, can be static. You can create your own choices by adding some choices. And the what's really cool about this is you can also have your own dynamic record choice, and not just static record choice. For example, let's say you have a list of records. For example, you have a list of 5 records, and you want to show those 5 records as 5 radio buttons on your screen. You can simply do that using the dynamic record choice, with the by using that particular dynamic record choice in this choice. I'll show you how that dynamic record choice as well, how it works. And similarly, this is same is the case for drop down list. You can use a static you can use some static choices. Also you can use a dynamic choice depending upon your requirement, and we'll see what how you use a dynamic choice in your particular in your radio buttons or drop down list, or multi-select checkboxes, or multi-select pick list. So these are the basic elements, and this is where you put your elements on the screen to get the data from the user, or to display the data to the user. Also, just to give you a quick setup, excuse me. So this is the label, and this is the unique name. So whenever you are trying to, let's say there is a text box and you name it as name, and a user enters his name, and you want to store that name in a particular field, so you will use that this particular name as a variable wherever you want to store that particular uh, into that particular field, and we'll also see how that is done. So after understanding what is a screen and what all we can do with the screen on the screen element, let's see what are the logic elements that you can use in the flow. So let's start with the discussion element. So discussion element is nothing but a if box. For those who have created flowcharts, I'm sure most of you must be aware about flowcharts. You must have made decision boxes. So this is kind of same. It's just that it can have multiple choices. For example, let's say we have a variable. Let's say we have input. We create a screen with a name. Now we want to check what is the name of the user. For example, you have a condition that if the username is Manish, Aviral, or Narendra, you want to do some automation based upon that. So how would you do that? Is you simply first of all give the appropriate name to that decision element. Check the name. Now these are the outcomes that you decide when you. This is where you use your conditions, and based upon these conditions you can branch your flow and conditionally run or execute your business process. So let's say name is Manish. This is where we select a resource. How do you select a resource? If it's a screen input field, you just go to the screen input and click on name equals Manish. So like I said, we have a you we have a requirement that we want to check for name for three people. So we'll create three outcomes for all of them, and we'll name them accordingly. Name is Aviral. Name is and then you have a default outcome. So what happens is if none of these conditions are satisfied, this particular outcome will be executed, and if you do not uh, connect this default outcome, it will simply not execute. Basically the flow will stop beyond that point. We'll see how it's done. So let's see. After defining the conditions, what I'm going to simply do is this is how. Let's say now you want to based upon what you have decided in the three conditions. Now let's say if you want to show data for three screens for Manish, for Aviral, for Sumit. Now based upon the name you want to show some screen on the info. Let's not bother about what information we are showing, because we are only discussing how the decision element works. So now what we'll say is the name is Sumit. For screen Aviral, we will say the name is Aviral, and for Manish, we will say the name is Manish. And there is also a default outcome, but we are not attaching it to any screen. So what will happen is if the name is not any of the three users, it will simply stop at the decision box and it won't execute any further unless you attach your default outcome to another screen or to another element of your flow. So this is how a basic decision element works. Now let's see what is an assignment element and how we can use the assignment element. So basically, as the name suggests, the assignment element is used to assign some value to another variable. That variable could be a screen input or a variable that you create in your flow. We will see how a variable is created in a flow just in in a couple of minutes. So let's say we had we have a variable. Let me just quickly create a variable so that guys can understand what are the variables and how we create the variables in the flow. So I'll just quickly create a variable for now and I'll explain rest of the variables in a while. So if you, let's say you have a variable and say input name, and you want to set the value of this variable for some uh, for some operations that you want to do in your process in your flow. So what you gonna do is you can simply, and you want to assign the name that the user has input on the screen into this particular value, into this particular variable. So what happens is, so this is how you can do it. So you have a variable named input name, and then you have a screen input called name. So this is how you can assign a value of one entity to another entity. So moving forward, let's understand what a loop is. A loop is basically, I'm sure, as the name suggests again, is basically used to iterate or go through the whole array of bunch of collection of objects or records or whatever the data type is. Basically the basically to iterate a collection, and we will see, just to for now just get a basic idea of loop. Once I introduce you with the collection variables, I'll show how we use the collection variables in our loop, and then how the loop can be used to iterate over the process. So this is the wait element. I'm not sure many have used it in their flows. So basically what happens is this wait element is used to execute or used to introduce some delay in your process. For example, if you want to introduce some delay in your event execution, so this is the your element to go to. There is nothing very fancy that I need to show you guys. It's the names are pretty self-explanatory. It's just one thing, you can define multiple events here, like you decide, like we created multiple outcomes in a decision box. Similarly, you can create multiple events in your wait element, and you can use those wait elements to introduce the variable, the different kind of events or the different kind of delays that you want to introduce into your process. So moving forward, let's see data. So basically these are the elements that are listed under the data section, are the elements which are used to work which are used to perform the DML operations on the data. So basically, DML operations are read, write, edit, delete. So basically, when you are manipulating the data, you will need to use one of these elements. So for creating something, for creating a record, you will you will need to use either record create or a fast create element. Uh, so in order to create a record, for example, if you want to create an account record, so what we'll simply do is we set the name field, we set the name of the account as arrange. So it's not necessary that you need to hard code it. You can also use your variables, for example, that the one we created input name, or you can also use the screen input. So basically, this is how you assign the value to a field using the variables, or you can also add a static text just like I did. And if, for example, if you have to use that once you create that record and you want to use that record's ID for further use in your entire business automation logic, you can assign that variable ID by creating a new variable. Let's say record ID, and you set it to this. If you did so, once the record create elements get executed, the record is created and the ID of that variable will be stored in this record ID variable, and you can use this variable according to your business logic. So similarly, you have record update. It's very much,
Right.
yeah.
Sorry to disturb. Can you please zoom your screen a bit so that everyone can see it?
Yes, I should have done that before.
Yeah, that should be fine. I think.
I-
Let's make it 125%.
Okay,
It's good.
I hope that's visible now, right?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot, Narender.
Awesome. So now let's see what a record update is. So similar to record create, the same is the process for record update as well. But in the case of update, what's really important is what record you are updating is you need to identify the record that you are creating updating. So to update that record, you primary the primary key for identifying any record in the database of Salesforce is the ID. So it's a best practice, if the ID is available for that particular record, use the ID. Otherwise, if you have some well-defined other criteria, you can use that as well. For example, name or some other field. So let's say if that record ID if you are using and it's equal to, I'm going to use our record ID variable, and let's say you have this particular account whose ID is record ID, and you want to update the description for that particular account. You can again either put a hard coded value, or if you have some variables where if you have some variable in your flow which is holding that particular information, you can use that variable and assign that variable to the description field. And this is how you can use the record update element. Now, what is record lookup element? So basically, for those who are who have a pretty decent about Apex programming, this is nothing but a way of querying the data using the SOQL query. But the only difference is, for record lookup, the result is stored in a in a bit different way. It's not directly stored into a list. We'll see how that information is stored when we are using a record lookup. So guys, for those who are not from the coding background, Think of record lookup uh, as a tool or as an element which helps you extract the information from your database according to the conditions that you are uh, inputting on your record lookup element. So let's say I want to look up an account. I want the information an account whose ID is, again, I'm using our variable record ID just for the understanding purpose. And you can also sort the results by any field if you have. It's not necessarily necessary to do this. And now this is the interesting part of a record lookup, because the data you are querying is not going in some SObject variable, but instead it will be stored in variables. The data that you want to extract is basically the field. For example, I want the name, I want the account number, I want the name of that account. Also, I want to see what's the rating on that account. So these are the fields that your you are instructing your flow to get extract the information from the database. So when you are doing a record lookup, your flow will search the database with the ID record ID and extract the information that is being stored in the fields account number, name, and rating. And how you store this information is completely up to you. You can use the existing variables, or you can create your own variables and then use those variables to store this information. And we'll see how how we can create variables in the flow. So don't worry, that part will also be covered in just a couple of minutes. Yeah. So next up is record delete. So again, just like record create and record update, you have record delete element, and this is the element which you use to record delete a particular record. So if I had to delete that particular account, I'll just specify the ID and set it okay, and then the record lookup is element is set, and once it gets executed, the record that particular record matching the criteria is will be deleted. Now we have fast create, fast update, fast lookup, fast delete. And before we move on to that, I want to quickly introduce you to the how we set up variables in our flow. So this is important before we move on to the other part of the fast lookup elements. So this is the standard variable that you create, what also we call as primitive data types in terms of coding language. So primitive data types, for example, text, number, currency, date time, boolean. So these are the basic data types that you can use and create a variable according to your needs. Now, then we have a collection variable. So what how exactly you define a collection? So collection is basically a collection of similar data type entities. For example, if you have a set of numbers, or what we call collection of numbers, that will be 1 2 3 and not one AB comma C, because the data type is not same. So collection is basically a collection of entities whose data type is same. So when you create a collection, you specify the data type, and you can use that collection to store the information of uh, various elements, or basically various entities as a part of that collection. Now what is an SObject variable? Now the standard, we know this, what are the standard data types that we all know: text, number, date, time, field, boolean. But in our Salesforce, what we mostly deal with is SObject variable. So SObject is nothing but the objects in our Salesforce. So when you are defining a SObject variable, you are basically defining a variable that will store the information of a particular variable of that particular SObject in that particular variable. So for example, if I had to store the information of an account and into a variable named as where account, will be simply stored, and you can view those variables that you have declared under the Explorer tab. So this is the SObject variable that I created, and this SObject variable will behave as an account record, not exactly record that is inserted in the database, but as a entity where you can store the information related to a particular account record. So moving forward, SObject collection variable, it's similar to a collection, but here the SObject type will be the data type of that particular collection, and those particular similar type of records, or what we call SObject types, will be stored in that particular variable. So if I had to store a list of accounts in a variable, say account list, and this is how you define. So this account list be will store the value of different accounts, or what we accounts, or in other terms account records, and you can use this collection to further in your process. So moving forward, we have stage. So for the timing, I'm not I'll leave this stage indicator for you to explore, because honestly I also haven't explored this much. I've used for few things, but I'll leave this up to you so that you guys can explore and see how a variable is recorded. So just to give you a brief overview how you use a stage variable. So basically, a stage variable is used to indicate the progress of a process inside a flow. So moving forward, you have constant. Constant is nothing but defining a constant variable with some constant value. Then we have a formula. Formula are again similar to defining what we all know. We have defined formula fields. So consider those formula fields as variables in this context, and you will see you can write any kind of formula. For example, if you can use, if the input name is, it's very much similar to what we write formulas for our formula fields. So there are certain restrictions and considerations, and look we'll take a look at them in the considerations. So this is how you define a formula, and you can use this formula again in your business process according to your needs. So guys, the formula variable is often used in your flow. So I would strictly really recommend you to practice more and more on formulas, and try to solve as much as possible business requirements relating to a formula or validation rule. So this will give you a good grip on the formulas that you can use and the functions that you can use according to your needs. So next we have a text template. Text template is basically used to store a text, and in this template, basically when when you have to store a lot more than just 255 characters, this is where the text template comes in handy, and you can use this text template variable to store that text. And again, you can then use this text template. It's mostly used for the send action email that is a part of flow, and you can use this text template as a body of that particular email that you are sending using the send email action of the flow. So this is the choice that I was talking about earlier on the input screen. So here you can define the choices that you want to create. Here you can set what is the value of that particular record choice. If it's a text, if it's a number, if it's currency or date or a boolean. Now moving forward, we have dynamic record choice. This is a bit of, I would say, a more complex thing. Not really complex if you once you go through it. So if I had to store a list of names, for example, let's say if I have three accounts and I want to store the value of the names of those three account records in a particular, I want to show those three names on UI. So this is how what you can do. You simply, since you are displaying the names, so the value of the data type will be text, and since you are since you want to extract the information on the account object, you will see, you will set the create a choice for account, and then you will set a criteria which will only look up for that particular record, for those particular records. And let's say we have name not equal to is null boolean. Basically we are retrieving all the counts where the name is not null. So basically this will give all the records that are existing in our database, and we can use this dynamic record choice in that on the UI to display the list of those names. And I'll show you how we can use this dynamic record choice on the UI as well. Names. So this is where you specify what will be the label of that particular value that you are value that you are showing on the UI. And since we are concerned with the name, this will store the name of that particular. This will query the name, or what you say, fetch or extract the name from the database. But what you want to do is you want to uh, identify the records not by the on the basis of their names. On the back end you want to deal on the ID basis, since ID is the universal identifier. So this is how you set a record. It's not necessary you store the value as an ID, and it's not necessary if you store the label as a name. But for just for the demo purpose, I'm showing you how you can use a dynamic record choice. So you can also sort results. You can also also choose the number of choices to display. So now this is where you can add the values that you want to use or you want to query from the database and assign those values to a particular variable. If I had, for example, description, then you can also use that and store that information in a variable. Since we are not using that, I'll simply skip that. Now also there is another variable that is called picklist choice. This is primarily used for picklist choices, where where you use where you use this element to query the picklist choices in existing in a picklist field that you have defined on particular object. For example, if I had to query the rating field of an account object, I would simply go and set it according to this. and this will give you the uh, pick list values for that particular field. So now if you had to display those particular choices and those particular account names that we just queried using the dynamic record choice, what you will simply do is you put a drop down list. Since drop down lists are primarily used for pick list, we can simply we will simply use the Picklist Choice record, and this is how you set up. So on the UI, when the so this is how you set up. And also for the dynamic record choice, if you want to show, for example, multi-select pick list or multi-select checkboxes, you can simply use the dynamic record choice to set up either pick list or account names. This will give you all the list of account names in this particular multi-select pick list, which you can later use on the UI, and user can select those but whichever records that he wants to select, and then you can use those records by giving the unique name to the screen input, and this input can be used further wherever you want to use in your process. So this is all about the variables in the flow. Now let's get back to where we left, and let's understand what is the difference between a record and a fast create. So basically a record works on a single record, and the fast create and the fast create, update, lookup, delete fast elements work on the collection variables. So if I had to work on a list of variables, for example, if I had to insert a list of account records that I have created in my flow, I would simply use a fast create, and then I'll simply choose a account list that I have created, and I can simply set it up. So when this fast create element is executed, all those records in the account list, SObject account, SObject collection variable named account list, will be created in your database. So similarly, same is the case with fast update, and same is the case with lookup and fast delete as well. So if you are if once you get more and more, once you practice more and more on these, you will get a good grip on this. So moving forward, there are a lot of actions. I'm sure there are a lot, so we can't uh, use, or we can't discuss or go through each of them individually. So what I'm going to do is just quickly use one. So basically these quick actions you can use in your flow, and you can say each quick action that you create in your organization will be displayed here in under the quick actions, and you can use those quick actions directly into your flow. If you want some shortcut, and you have if you want, for example, you want to quickly create a account and you already have the information, so instead of assigning the values in the record create, you can simply use your quick action and assign the values to the attributes. For example, if I had to create the new account, I would simply say new account name is, if I had any variable, I would use this, and then I would select any other parameter, account type also, and then I could use account phone. And similarly, you can, and these attributes are nothing but the values that are the fields that you have on your quick action. So these attributes are rendered from the fields that you have on your quick action layout. So since there are no output for this quick action, the tab is empty. So this is how you set up a quick action in your flow. So quickly moving forward, these are the email alerts that you can use in your flow. to send email alerts from the flow itself. So you can see the extent of process and the extent of complexity depends upon you how complex you can get, and you can do pretty much everything within a flow itself without having to write any code. So, and these are the static actions. For example, send an email, submit for approval, post to chatter, and activate session based permission set. So basically these are some standard static actions that you can use, and that you can use in your flow. So I believe I have covered pretty much all of it. Yes. So for the demo purpose, I'm going to quickly show you how you can interact with the user based upon how you can interact with the user on a UI level, and how you can, for example, gather information from a user. So let's quickly create a dummy flow where we will be using uh, we will be using our flow to gather information for a particular account, and we will store that particular information and update the account record. Or rather, we can say we will create an account record just by using the flow. So let's say, since we have already rating field, I'm gonna add account name. So for the time being, just for the demo purpose, we will keep it short due to the time constraint. So we have a screen where we have some input variables, and those that screen will help us gathering the information, and we'll store that in, we will use that information to create a record, create a account record. So this is how we are setting up. We have name field and we are storing, then we are using the input screen input element that we had, and we are using that information and simply assigning that information to the fields of the account record, and we'll simply join these two. So this is really important. The one you see a green left arrow on the top right corner of a screen, this decides the start element of a process of your flow. So this is the point where your flow starts executing. So if you don't mark this, and if you try to save this, it will give you a warning saying please assign, there is no start element defined, please assign a start element. So create account. So this is where, guys, what we use in our flow. If you are wondering what are the rest of the processes, it is basically a bit of complex and beyond the scope of the beginner series. So we'll keep it to the screen and auto launched, and these are the primarily most used types on in the flow. So since we have a screen flow, we won't be used. Since we have a screen in our flow, we won't be able to use auto launch flow. Even if you set it to auto launch and if you try to save it, we'll get an error. So we will have to save it as a screen flow. So now once we create a flow, in our tomorrow session, we will show how we can, what are the various ways we can launch a flow. So keeping that part aside, I'm gonna just run the flow from here itself, and this is how it will look. So if you give it a name, for example, education rating is hot. So this is basically creates your account in the process. So if I had to go to, if we go to our accounts tab, we'll see SFAB account. So this is how you create a flow, and this is how you run a flow. There's also there's also something called debug, and we will discuss it about in our next session, how we can debug a flow. So I guess we'll wrap it up for today, since we have already discussed very much at length. And I hope you guys, and I'll definitely ask you guys to go and explore on your own as much as possible, so that you get more and more doubts and we can clarify your doubts. So I guess it's back to our slide, and I guess it's time for the Q&A, or rather we have our next slide, that is must read resources. So Manish.
And I guess our mastery resources are not updated as per the flows, but we will share the mastery resources in the description of this video.
Okay,
Uh,
okay, no problem, we can do that, yes.
so moving to the next slide, guys.
Yes.
Please be a multiplier. I hope you learned a lot in today's sessions, because flow is again a very vast topic in uh, Salesforce, and it gives you a lot of power to create a lot of automation in your Salesforce org. So don't keep this knowledge with yourself. Share this with your network and ask them to share this with their network. So this is how you can actually create a chain, and you can spread the knowledge about Salesforce. And also you can tweet us using hashtag SFAB and hashtag SFDCFacts. And you can create a awareness about this program. Now we'll go to Q&A sessions. So then we have few of the great questions, and I hope you can answer those. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So the first question that we have is from Raj Kumar, and he's asking like how many records can be updated using Flow?
So if you are using a record update element, then obviously you will be updating just one record. But in case you are updating the records using the fast update element, so please note, since I have not completed the session, but just since you have asked, so flows do not do not have the power to exceed the governor limits. So flows also obey the governor limits that are being imposed on by Salesforce, just like in Apex. For example, if you have a collection, uh, basically the number of records that you can update in a transaction in Apex, that would be the similar number of the same amount of records you can update using the flows as well. using the fast element.
Okay. I hope this answers your question, Rajkumar. The second question that we have is from Ruchika, and she wants to know the number of flows that we can create in a Salesforce org.
Number of
So,
flows.
yeah,
Okay, these are the type of questions that I really don't know how to answer to, because these are the questions uh, that are strictly documentation based, and you can easily find the answers. We will definitely post the answer. I'll keep this question as, I'll bookmark this question, and I'll answer this question in the comments in the video.
yeah. So, Ruchika, I have shared a link as well in the live chat. So, please explore your answer there. And that particular link has all the flows, considerations, and limits. So, you may find your answer there. And it's a very detailed article. So, I hope you will find the answer of your question as well. The third question is from Divya, and she is asking how to add lookup field in flow.
Okay, very awesome question. So, lookup fields cannot be directly used in flows, but we have some awesome community people who have created a lookup component for flows. So what you can do is you can use that component, you can install that package in your organization, and then you can use that particular lightning component in a flow screen, and this is how you can use the lookup field.
I hope this answers your question, Divya. So there is no direct way to use the lookup field. You may have to install a app exchange package for that. Uh, the next question is from Ruchika, and she wants to know the difference between the record create and fast create.
Okay, so like I said, the the record elements work on a single entity, single record, but on the other hand, the fast elements work on a collection of variables. You can also use the fast elements just to work on a single variable, but if you have to work on multiple variables, for example, if you have to create multiple records, or you have to update multiple records, or you have to delete multiple records, or you have to in case query also multiple records, you have to use in that case a fast element. And if you have to just query a single record, you know that I am querying something on id basis, so I know that uh, only one record will be found. So in that case you can use the record create or record lookup element.
I hope this answers your question, Ruchika. The next question is again from Ruchika, and she is asking, can we create bulk records using flows in Salesforce without using loop?
Without using loop.
Yeah.
So yes, the answer to your question would be, I'm not sure how, in what context you are asking, but if you are saying that you don't want to create use a record create inside a loop to uh, to avoid the governor limits, so what you will need to do is you will need to use a collection variable. Then first you will create a SObject variable, you will assign the values to that SObject variable, then use add that SObject variable to a SObject collection, and in this will happen in the loop, and then once you exit the loop, just update or create the fast that particular SObject collection variable using the fast element.
I hope this answers your question, Ruchika. So this is how you need to do it. You need to use the loop to build your collection first, and then you can use your collection to bulk create the record. The next question is from Ravi, and he is asking, can we, explain the flow in next session using a real life example if we have anything handy?
Right now we do have a use case that we will be covering in our next session, so I hope you will be in the next session, so stay tuned, you will get your answer.
Okay. So next, I hope this answers your question, Ravi, and thanks, Narendra. So the next question is again from Ravi, and he's asking if a user who created a flow does not have access or ownership to the records he is changing by the flow, would it fail or pass?
Okay, so it's not about who created the flow, first of all, Ravi. So what is important is how the flow is being executed and how. So basically, the flow executes in two modes. That is the user mode and the system mode. So if you are launching a flow in a user mode, basically using a quick action or screen flow. Oh, sorry, quick action or custom link or custom button. In that case, the flow will run in the user mode. So basically all the permissions that are assigned to the user will also be imposed on that flow that is being executed. But if we if you are running the flow in the system mode, so if you want to run the flow in the system mode, you have to launch it via Apex, REST API, or the process builder. So if you launch a flow from a process builder, the flow will run in the system mode, and the flow will have all the permissions to change the records.
Uh, that's a great explanation, Narendra, and I hope it answers your question, Ravi. Next question is from Bhaskar, and he's asking, can a single flow work on different objects? Can we use the same
Yes.
flow on multiple objects?
Yes. So
Okay.
like we discovered, what are the various elements. So you have fast and record elements, which are used to basically extract data or manipulate data. So you can use multiple fast or record elements in your flow for multiple objects.
Thanks, Narendra. So I hope this answers your question, Bhaskar. And we had similar question from Gautami as well, who she asked like, is flow object specific? So as per your answer, the flows are not object specific, right? It can
Yes.
be over multiple objects.
Yes.
So so that's the answer for your question, Gautami. Flows are not object specific. You can use those on multiple objects. And now next question is from Dheeraj, and he's asking, we are creating field in flows. Can we assign permission for those fields like FLS?
Okay, so this is not something that Flow can do. Only in the you will need to use the Apex for this. The FLS is basically defined. If you remember our security sessions, you will realize the FLS is only implemented using the profile and not or the permission set. So basic, if you want to do something, some kind of this kind of manipulation, you will need Apex and not the Flow. It's beyond the limits of the flow.
Uh, I don't see any further question, and I hope uh, this answered your question, Dheeraj. So, so I think that's the wrap for today. And one thing that I would like you to ask, guys, the flow again. I'll say like flow is again a very big topic, and you, we can only cover few things here. It's something that you need to explore from your side because there's a lot of things that you can do using flows. So explore it as much as you can from your side, and also please do join us tomorrow to where we'll be covering some of the advanced things in the flows, and we'll be covering a scenario as well. So in that way, maybe like you'll be able to grasp more knowledge about flows. So till that time, keep learning, keep sharing, guys. Have a good day.